Okay. All right. So I don't think I was recording earlier, unfortunately, but now we're getting to the meat and potatoes, and I am recording now. So here we go. Okay. Okay. All right. So speaking of your phone, you want what's most accessible and what's easiest. So your phone is in your pocket; it's ready to go. Whatever you're doing in the day, we always have our phone with us. So using our phone camera is a great option. You don't have to use a big fancy camera to get stuff done. Okay, and I'm going to take you through a few simple and straightforward tricks and tips to make sure that you are actually creating photos that you can be proud of and proud to share without a bunch of effort. Okay. All right. So 4 things, these are the big things to keep in mind when you are doing mobile photography. The first one is lighting. Second one is composition. Third one is storytelling. And then the last one is editing and consistent editing. So I'm going to break down each of these in detail, but always go back to remembering, okay, lighting, composition, storytelling, editing. Those are the 4 big things to be keeping in mind. Okay, and while we're kind of interspersing these big ideas, you can always have a little mnemonic in your head. I was a former teacher, and so mnemonics really help you remember things. So think TAB, think, act, brand. So think is thinking about some questions before you take your picture. Act is using the tips I'm going to go over as you're taking the picture, a few things to keep in mind in terms of lighting and that sort of thing. And then branding, and that's where the editing comes in and being consistent and thinking about what your brand represents. Okay, so think, act, brand, TAB. Okay, so before you take any picture at all, like you just pull out your phone, you're ready to go, you just want to click. The first thing you should do is ask yourself a couple of really quick questions, okay? So ask yourself, what is the purpose of this photo? What am I trying to convey in this photo? So for example, here's a perfect example. It's really simple from the other day with my daughter. She's 9 and she's starting to get into photography. And she's just got like a little phone that she takes pictures of. And so she took this picture. She was so proud of it. It was of her son. I mean, not her son, my son, sorry. Her brother, and a pile of Jenga. And the Jenga was super in focus, and my son was behind it, and he was kind of out of focus. So, it gave that depth of field, which we all kind of find very pleasing. She was so proud of it. And she said, "Mom, look at the picture I took of Malcolm." And of course I was like, "Oh yeah, it's beautiful, sweetie." But here's the thing. She took a picture of Malcolm. So what should have been in focus was Malcolm, and she still could have gotten the depth of field by blurring the Jenga, if that's what she wanted to do, right? So her goal, her purpose was to take a picture of her brother, and she wanted the depth of field and all that stuff. But she missed the mark because the story she wanted to tell was about her brother, not about the Jenga. And what was in focus was the Jenga. Does that make sense? So those are things, that's like an example of something to think about. If you're a business, think about, what am I selling? So what am I trying to focus or showcase here? Ask yourself, storytelling factor. What is the story here? What can I get into this frame that's going to really show people the beauty of whatever it is I'm describing? So, I mean, if you're taking a picture of someone with a product, or maybe you're an office worker, and you want to show your office life. So you should be thinking about storytelling. If I'm taking a picture, do I want the person to look like they're super serious and working hard? Do I want them to look like they're thrilled to be at work and they're smiling? It can be the exact same picture, but just whether or not the person is looking at their work or looking at the camera will make a huge difference in the story you're telling, right? A big one, and we're going to talk a little bit more about light, is where is the best natural light at this moment? As an amateur photographer, natural light is going to be your best friend. Ask yourself who or what is the subject of my photo. That goes back to my Jenga example, right? Making sure that your subject of your photo, the story you want to tell, the person or thing that you want this picture to be about, is actually at the forefront and is actually at the main part of the picture. Okay, very practical tip. I think everyone my age or older who I've told this to has been like, oh, I never thought about that. Everyone 25 and under is like, yeah. Those of us that didn't grow up with a camera in our hands, we never think to wipe our lens. So the first thing you want to do before you do anything else, take a moment, take the sleeve of your shirt or some sort of fabric, and go ahead and wipe the lens on your camera. If you're getting hazy pictures often, it's probably because you're throwing it in your purse, in your back pocket, in the lint of who knows where, and it's not clean. So the very first thing you should always do is go ahead and clean the lens of your camera. Super simple, right? Makes a big difference. The other thing to do, I'm just gonna let a couple more participants in. Admit all. Okay, the other thing that's really helpful is turning on the grid in your camera settings. So if you're using your native camera, which just means the camera app that comes on your phone, take a moment to go into the settings and look for the grid. Now, it depends on what type of camera you have. I know I have an LG, and my version of LG actually doesn't have grids. It's one of the few that doesn't, but most Androids, it's actually in the settings of the camera, and there'll be something that looks kind of like a waffle, or it might say grids, and there'll be a little toggle that you can turn on and off. It depends on your camera, so I can't give you specific instructions for yours. If you have an iPhone, it's not in your native camera app settings. You actually have to go into your general settings, and then if you go down to your camera settings, you'll find it in there. So it's in your general settings if you have an iPhone, okay? Just admitting a few more people. Okay. Before we go on to the next slide, let's just see if there's any questions. Sorry about that. Okay. Questions. Okay. So yes, so Amber Hall says, my camera grid shows a 3x3. The 3x3 is the perfect one to be in. There's some people have more than one, but the thirds is the one that you want to be in, as opposed to a square 3x3. Thank you for clarifying that. That's a good point. Okay. All right. All right, so now let's talk. Those are the things you're thinking about before. Where's the natural light? Have my grid on? What story do I want to tell? That sort of thing. Act. It's time to act. So we're going to go through some essential things that you need to know for just taking better pictures. Okay, so lighting, composition, and storytelling are the three main things that you want to keep in mind as you're taking a picture. And if you're thinking of these as you're doing your picture, it's really going to help. Okay, so here we go. Lighting. Amateur photographers, I already mentioned this. Natural light is always best. So if you can get close to a window, that's the way to go. If you are wanting to take a picture of food or product, please don't take it with your ambient light, especially food. The ambient light, which that means like your overhead lights or your, your fluorescent lights or whatever, incandescent lights, whatever you have, it really changes how the food looks. And often, especially for food, it kind of, it's not flattering, in a word. So move it. If you have tables that are towards the front of your restaurant, move it towards the front, move it and put it on a table that's at your window. Same with product light. Same with people. Like Try and get the people close to natural light, and you're going to do better. Go ahead and kill the lights in the room where you're taking the picture. So you bring it close to the window, you turn off the overhead lights, and that's where you're going to get your nicest, crispest, best true color of what's actually happening. It makes a huge difference. If you were to just do this right now, take a picture with the light on, take a picture with the light off, you actually yourself will visually, although you didn't know it before, you'll be like, oh wow, that's a really nice picture. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is when you have your subject in your screen finder. So right now, if you've got your camera and you want to take a picture right now, so you've got your subject, whatever you want to take a picture of, in your viewfinder. If you tap on your subject, it will change the digital exposure. So your camera is smart, your phone is really smart. So if you're noticing that your whites are blown out, so they don't have any detail, it's too bright, what's happening is your phone's just trying to do its best and guesstimate what it should be exposing to or how much light it should be letting into the picture. So let's say you're taking a picture of someone like me who is as fair gets, and you notice their forehead or their cheek is like white, like no definition at all. You can actually just tap and hold on their cheek or wherever is super white, and you will see the exposure go down. So you'll see the light in the picture go down a little bit so that it's exposed properly for where they are. In the same way, if there's a part that's super dark and you want to lighten it, just tap in that spot. So tap whatever you want to be exposed properly, tap that, and it's going to change the exposure so that your picture that you get in the end is a better picture without whites blown out or everything being super dark. You can even, if you want to explore and see kind of what exposure you like, you can actually even go ahead and when you have a picture, just like touch the darkest spot, touch the lightest spot, see what you like, and go from there. Okay, soft light versus hard light. I've got a couple pictures to show in the next slide with this, but general rule is soft light is usually most flattering, especially for people. I have a few pictures to show you how hard light can look good too, if that's what you're going for. But times to keep this in mind is golden hour. So, you know, the 2 hours kind of before sunset or after sunrise, really great time to take pictures. Cloudy days, that makes diffuse light. It's much nicer and not so harsh. So any cloudy day is a great day. If you're taking a picture inside beside a window, you're getting diffuse light. Even if it's a bright day, if you're inside beside a window, it's probably going to be diffuse light unless it's a really bright day. So that's going to take a nice picture to a calmer picture, you could say. I'll show you in a minute what I mean. Decide on the mood. So you can orient yourself with different light sources. So thinking about what you're going for is going to help you as well. So you've got direct light where it's facing front on the person, side light, which is what I am today because I've got the window to my right, and backlit light. And I'll show you examples of each and how each might be helpful. I'm also going to go over with you product photography. So a couple of really easy ways to take pictures of products that really light it well and also get rid of all the background so that if you want a really uncluttered photo with a lot of negative space, I'll show you a really simple setup to do that as well. Okay. All right, so soft light and hard light. So soft light is cloudy days, golden hour, which we went over. It means there's not a lot of shadows. It's gentle shadows. Hard light is like sunny days, mid-afternoon, you know, the light is right overhead and you'll see a lot of shadows, really intense highlights, so really bright whites, dark blacks. It's good for if you're going for drama. It just depends on what you're going for. Okay. All right, so here's some nice examples of soft light. So this, you can see this is a picture of something that's inside. You can see it's side lit. The shadows are over here, but there isn't harsh shadows. They're very diffuse shadows, right? So that's what you get when you're inside. And you have cloudy days here. And then this person, probably a cloudy day, but also she's under a bit of an overhang. So it gives you that nice softer light. Everything is even through the whole picture. There's no harsh shadows, right? That's soft light. Now, soft light is generally my preference, especially when taking pictures of people. But I'll show you how hard light can also look really eye-catching. So this is hard light. So you can see here very strong shadows, really light highlights, and you can see how it is a different effect, right? But it is kind of, it's very dramatic and it can be really appealing, right? Especially when, you know, this picture of these people down here, it's kind of neat. They were carefully placed within the highlights. So the shadows kind of make everything else go away, and clearly they're the focal point, which is also a nice trick, right? It's kind of neat and it gives it a good look. If you were, and this ice cream too, you know, ice cream is so often very gentle and soft. Well, this is a brand with a more vivid kind of branding, and you can see how these harsh shadows really lend to their brand, right? So it can be advantageous. So direct side and backlight. So it's all about where your camera is positioned to the light, right? So if you think about your subject, if your subject is facing the light source, like the light source is coming straight at their face or straight at the product, that's called direct light. And if it's coming from the side, that's called side light. Very creative names here, as you can see. And then backlight is when the light source is behind. So I'll show you examples of each of those. Again, each tell a different story and give you a different mood. So this is direct light. Usually portraits are direct light. They try and even out this. So this is a good example of that. Same with this product photography of this bruschetta is direct light. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, and that's what a lot of us are used to. Side light here, we have a little bit more harsh side light, but not significantly. And that original picture that I went over before being side light, that's what these are. Side light is really common. It's probably of the three, it's the safest way to go. But it's kind of, it's your call, right? Something, it's probably a good thing to mention right now when you know, we're talking about side light and all the different types of light. Okay, there's something I'm going to tell you right now, a little pause in the presentation. Just want to remind you, you have feet, right? So many of us, we take a picture and we're like, okay, that's the picture, it's done, okay? You might be surprised if you just move your feet and shift around to a different part of the subject and reset the scene. It takes 10 seconds and you'll get a completely different picture. This is good for two reasons. One, you might like the second picture more, or the third picture, or whatever. But the second thing that's really good is a lot of people ask us, you know, I don't know what to post. I don't, you know, they're on Instagram or whatever, and they're like, I've already posted all my stuff. I don't know what other pictures I can put up. Okay, you can take similar pictures of the same product. Like, you can use the same product, move your feet, take it from different angles, take it from above, take it from the side, take it with front light, take it from side light, take it with backlight. They have a completely different look. And you've just, in the 30 seconds it took you to set up that cup of coffee or that person or that lipstick container, whatever it is, you've probably just made 10 different images just by moving your feet. So it's a really tricky thing. Like, when you get into it, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Just move your feet. You'd be amazed at how it changes your perspective. Okay, so back to the show. Okay, backlight. Now backlight, because the shadows are on your side, on the photographer's side, it tends to silhouette people a lot. So here you can see silhouettes, and this is a really nice picture of a dress. Again, it's kind of silhouetted. It's really neat how this photographer is not my picture. Took this because it shows the detail in the dress, right? But it gives a different mood. So just keep in mind, if you've got backlight, especially a lot of people do backlight accidentally. It's a great artistic choice, but if you're trying to take a picture of someone's face or of the detail on the front of a product that you are looking at, if it's backlit, you're going to lose a lot of that detail. It's probably not the best way to do it. If you're going for a vibe that, you know, you want to show the silhouettes or kind of give that cozy kind of feel, as you can see in a lot of these, definitely go for it. But if you're trying to get a detail of a person's face or of a product, don't use backlight. It's your least effective way of showing that detail on the front of the box or the person or whatever it is. Okay, so while we're on the topic of light, this is something I do all the time at home. And when I was doing some of my digital Main Street work, I had a traveling roadshow in which I brought a piece of Bristol board. Sweep and bounce. Okay, two pretty generic words, but in photography, they have a very specific meaning. So a sweep is when you set up a product on a piece of paper, a piece of starched fabric. You can use a variety of things, but it gets rid of the horizon. So if the horizon is taking you away from the product, use a sweep. A piece of Bristol board from the dollar store works really well. If you are maybe have something greasy, then maybe don't use a piece of paper. You might want to use a piece of vinyl or something so you can wipe it up after. But you can see here, just by placing your product on the sweep and then just using that piece of paper and taping it up to a wall, a chair, whatever it is, you get rid of the horizon and suddenly all of the focus is on your product. So in the first picture here, that's a great picture. I mean, if I were to just look at that, it looks like a pretty scrumptious cupcake, right? But when you put the sweep in there, there is nothing to distract my eye. I'm not looking at the horizon. My eye isn't automatically getting drawn to the line halfway up the cup because the horizon was there. Now I'm really getting drawn into the icing. And it's really focusing my eye on the product and nothing else. Super easy to do. And you can do it with any color. I often, when I do food photography, I'll even use placemats, like fabric placemats, and like kind of more plain ones. You don't want to get too busy, but they work really, really well as well. Yeah, so that's something for you to keep in mind. So that is called a sweep. Now a bounce, super easy DIY bounce, is a piece of Bristol board. I like to use foam core from the dollar store. So you know the white big Bristol board that doesn't bend, like it's hard, that's foam core. I put that beside my my setups all the time. And so what it does is, okay, so first you put it opposite your light source. So if you usually do it with, or you always do it with, your light source is doing side light, and then you'll put it on the opposite side of your object that you're taking a picture of. You can do it with people too. I've had people hold up a foam core when I'm taking a picture of a person. And what it does is it bounces light back onto the product. And so it fills out the light in the whole frame. It doesn't make a significant, like it's not like having a light over on the other side, but it really fills it out and makes it more even. So you can see here these shoes. So with the fill light and without the fill light, the difference it makes. These are mixed up, sorry. So this one is without a fill light and this one is with a fill light. Sorry, I labeled that wrong. Yeah, and so you can just see how the whole product is more evenly shown. This works particularly well in food photography. I really like using it for food photography when I'm not looking for a really moody vibe going on. Okay, and so then here's a picture. This is from pixels.com if you want to go find it yourself. But I have a PDF with this on it that we'll also send you when we send you the link. So just as a reminder of what you have. So you have the window on the right here. You have your bounce over on the left, your products in the middle, your camera is here and you're using a sweep that is taped. And it can, like I said, be a Bristol board, piece of vinyl, whatever works for you. Really unclutters your background, really, really helps. Okay. So the third thing is composition. Artists in the crowd know this very well. We're going to talk about we're going to focus on the rule of thirds. We'll also talk a bit about negative space, and we're going to talk about perspective. And photography, it does make a big difference where you take the picture, and we'll go over that. So rule of thirds is basically you've got your grid now set up on your camera. The no-fail way to do things is to think about your composition as lining things up on the grid. So if you have a person, put them 2/3 on that third grid line there, and it's going to make a well-balanced picture that keeps your eye moving, because this is the whole thing about the rule of thirds. It keeps your eye looking at the picture and kind of circling around the picture. If you have horizons or some sort of like workspace, often if you put the horizon at 1/3 or 2/3, it's going to make a more appealing photo than if you put it halfway. And in this case, so this horizon isn't quite like that, it's not quite centered, but you can see the ice cream, the subject, is at the 1/3 line. So that's what's going on there. Okay, now, doesn't mean, here's the big thing about art, right, and photography, rules are made to be broken. So definitely practice using the thirds, but if you want to center, you can. Like you can make that conscious decision, right? And in some cases, it also looks very good. So you can see a few examples of when there was a conscious decision made to center it, and these pictures look great. Rule of thirds is usually the way to go, but rules are made to be broken. So I don't want you to go away from this and think, oh my gosh, I can never, I can only do rule of thirds and be bound by that. Like, let's just stay relaxed and just what works kind of thing, okay? Okay, now overfilling the frame versus negative space. So negative space is when there's just emptiness in your picture. It gives your eye room to rest. It often points to where you want the reader or the consumer of your photo to go. So these are really good examples of negative space. So I love this picture just because the negative, it's totally overfilled, except there's blank right there, and that's right where your eye goes, right? It's the exact opposite of what you normally see, and this is a very pleasing picture. This is a classic example of negative space. So lots of white all around the bruschetta, and away we go. Okay. This is another example. Mango Street Lab, I put that in there to remind myself. This is a really good resource if you're learning about photography. They have a YouTube channel, they have a website, really good tutorials, highly recommend them. So you can see here they have a lot of negative space in these pictures, and it really does like up the appeal, right? Like you're looking at it, you're thinking, wow, this is nice. So that's what negative space can do for you. Overfilling, so again, these are pictures from Mango Street Lab. Overfilling. Here's another, this is an example of doing the exact opposite, putting too much, but you can see that they consciously made the decision, like they want your focal point to be on these cakes, on this cake stand. So they brought that up and they blurred out the background. So they're still making a conscious decision, even though there's a lot to look at, and it looks good, right? This one here, same thing. This is a really common thing I do with my food photography is I'll start with my subject, and then I'm like, ugh, it's not enough there. Got to add a little more for context. And so I add more and more and more until I get to a place where I really like, and it's often very full. But again, see, they've got this egg pretty close to the 1/3, so it's very attractive. Okay. Okay, perspective and position related to the subject. This is huge. Okay, so in photography with your phone, you can go straight on, you can go overhead, or you can go 45 degrees, basically. I'll say this, especially with food, overhead or straight on is almost always the way to go. Everyone always goes 45-degree angles. If you just lowered your phone down a bit or put your phone right on top, you would find you found your picture much more appealing. So the tendency is we pull out our phone, we take a picture. Well, you're pointing down towards that subject, whatever it is, and it just doesn't make as good of a photo. Now, the exception is in food photography, if you're taking a picture of a drink, Usually a drink is best at 45 degrees because you can see kind of the height of the drink, and then you can see, oh, this is like a cold drink. For example, there's ice. I can see the ice in it. It's very appealing that way to really get the full product. But in most cases, straight on or overhead, like also called a flat lay, is the way to go. Simple trick. I'm just going to okay, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to tell you a simple trick. I was going to show you with my phone, the simplest thing you can, or like with my phone in person, but I can't switch from my unsharing right now. I can't unshare. Okay, take your phone. Where is your camera? It's at the top third, right? Yes, it's at the top third. Okay, so even if you're trying to, let's say you've got something that is on a table and you're like, okay, I'm gonna take it straight on. Well, look at your phone right now. Just put it on your table, facing up, like perpendicular to the table, as if you were gonna take a picture of your computer, for example, or something that was like a cup of coffee, okay? What do you notice? Well, probably if it's a smaller object, you're still going at a 45-degree angle, which I just told you isn't the most appealing picture you can take. Here's a tip that is so obvious once you hear it, but you never think of it off the top. Flip your camera upside down. Where is your lens now? It is level with whatever is on your table. It is looking straight on at your table. Take the picture. Your phone is smart. It will actually flip that picture and you have gotten a straight on angle. So you can take two pictures, take one with your camera the right side up, and then take a picture with your camera upside down, and you'll be like, whoa, it looks so much better when I flipped my camera upside down, or my phone upside down, because it's head on. It's no longer on that 45-degree angle. So every time you're taking a picture of something super low, try doing that. Just flip your phone upside down and you'll be able to get it straight on in a way that you can't when you have it right side up. Okay, moving right along. Storytelling factor. Think about what you are trying to tell them. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Set your scene. What is the emotion that you want to get out? Be thinking about that as you take your picture. So you can see here, some of these pictures are actually from the same photo shoot, right? But they tell all very different stories. So getting a close-up of the oysters versus him holding it. I'm telling a story about him when I take a picture of him holding it. I'm telling a picture of his tools and the ingredients when I get close. I'm telling a picture of an experience when I surround it with newspaper, my breakfast, or when I'm beside the pier with a bottle of wine. I'm telling very different stories with all of these. And you can do that with the same product. So just think about, what am I doing here? Am I telling about the person with the food or the person with the lipstick or whatever it is? Am I telling a story just about the product? Am I telling a story about the whole experience? Do I want to have a picture where someone's actually putting it on, this lipstick on in their mirror, and they have a nice bathroom, like it's luxurious? What's the story? And then frame your picture accordingly. Okay, and so here's some more examples of how you can kind of mix it up. Like these are telling stories about the craftsmanship, right? There's telling stories about, you know, I could just take a picture of this juice, but I have the farmer holding the juice. And suddenly it feels very organic, as opposed to if it was in white, right? And I used the bounce and sweep. This here is telling a story. And I personally am appealed. I'm buying into this. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be good for my family. I want to bring this home. It's nourishing, right? So think about that. Okay, finally, branding it. So this is where we're going to start talking about apps. Okay, so you want your pictures, if you're putting them up on social media, you want them to be consistent and cohesive. So you want them to always have kind of a similar feel. So if you're dark and moody, always make it dark and moody. If you're light and bright, always make it light and bright. If you know, you'll get to, if you're consistent, you'll get to a point where people actually see a photo in their feed and they'll be like, oh, I think that is whatever. A perfect local example of that, a fantastic photographer. Actually, I'll give you two examples, different moods. One photographer is Chelsea Nason. She's super light and bright wedding photographer. If you started following her and you had her feed, you would always know that's a Chelsea Mason picture. And I think about her. Another example is Carrie Ford, and she's the exact opposite. She's a super moody and intimate photographer. Every photo, you can tell that's Carrie's photo because it's consistent in her her branding and her editing of it. Okay, so when you edit, if you're going to edit, you want to edit the essentials. So check the white balance. So that means, you know, is it super yellow? Is it super blue? Let's even it out to nice clean whites. Sharpness means, is it fuzzy? Fix that sharpening. Shadows and highlights. So like we talked earlier about what shadows and highlights are. If you're a super moody person, up the shadows. If you're super light and bright, up the highlights. Also, we often take a picture with our phone and we don't notice the horizons are uneven. So go ahead, when you go to edit, you want to just kind of crop and even it out so that your horizons are straight. Second thing to do is use a filter. Don't go crazy with the filters, but use a slight filter if you want to kind of increase that mood. So if you're always warm, have a warm filter that you're always using the same one. Okay, so 2 great apps for this. And I'm not going to take you through these apps because you know how when someone's teaching you something and they teach you like 5 apps and then you're like, which one was which? Okay, I'm going all in with the next app. So I'm not showing you these ones, but I'm telling you, if you do want to investigate this, 2 great apps are Snapseed, and VSCO or VSCO. If you have a teenager, you've probably heard the term VSCO girl, which is a certain brand of teenage girl who's kind of granola or whatever, and she tends to edit with certain filters. Anyway, a little aside, this is where the term VSCO girl comes from, if you're wondering. And so once you've edited, then you post, and then you just do the same thing every time. The editing shouldn't take a lot of thought. It should be, you know what, this is my favorite filter. This is how I always sharpen a little bit. Away I go. You shouldn't be putting a ton of time into it. You should just be like, and away you go. Okay. All right, another app that I'm not going to take you through because I actually don't have an iPhone, but this is a really cool app. A lot of business owners that I've talked to ask me, like, how do I get the fuzzy background with my phone? Okay, so if you have an iPhone, Focus app, if the only thing you're worried about is like that bokeh look, fuzzy background, Focus app is the app for you. Super easy to use. I don't have an iPhone anymore, so I don't have it. But it can do that aperture so you get the blurry background. You can, when you take a picture, it's because it's all digital. It's not actually doing it in the moment. It's your camera digitally. It's like reprogramming it. I'm not a programmer, but whatever it's doing in the background. You can actually like tap the part you want to be in focus and it'll blur the other parts, like the foreground or the background. And it'll even like mimic, if you know some lenses you like it'll actually mimic how certain lenses act. So it has these filters basically that it'll make sure that every photo has the same type of blur filter. Really cool apps, really easy to use. So that's a recommendation. The one that I'm going to focus on for the next 5 minutes is Adobe Lightroom that I mentioned to you at the beginning. Again, if you didn't have a chance to download it, you don't have it, it's fine. I'm going to take you through some of the basics just to show you what it's capable of. Now, just so you have that background, Adobe Lightroom is a paid product through Adobe. However, the app for your phone is free. There's just some parts of it that you can't access without paying. But I actually, even though I have an Adobe Lightroom subscription for my graphic design work and photography work, I don't use my paid subscription on my phone Lightroom. So I have never unlocked the paid portions of it, and I love it. So basically, if you go ahead and open up the app, you'll see a screen that looks like this first screen capture here. So you would want to take a picture. There's a few things about taking a picture in it that I'm going to take you through. So the first thing is when you go to, so you should now see something in the screen finder. It was probably on auto. So if you go right beside the blue dot for take a picture, if you click on auto, you can change it to pro. And when you change it to pro, it will open up or unlock a bunch of settings. So a couple of things I wanted to point out to you were the white balance. I just want to let you know, like if you're someone who really tends towards cool tones or really warm tones, you can change your white balance to meet that. So experiment with that. AWB is auto white balance. That's where I spend most of my time. But if you are someone who really likes cool photos, like not like cool photos, like cold photos, go into your white balance, and you can actually change your white balance and consistently choose a filter that is a little more on the blue side. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that there, and I put the arrow there for you to see where white balance is. Hold on, I have a question. Whoops, I go a little crazy with my mouse, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, questions. Is the app free? Oh, yes. Okay, and you see that I was answering that right now. Yeah, okay. All right, faking portrait mode. So we all know the like iPhone 11 or Huawei has this amazing portrait mode. My husband has a Huawei, and portrait mode is incredible, but not all of our phones have that. I have a super cheap, like really cheap, came free with my very cheap phone plan LG phone. So it doesn't have portrait mode. It's never going to have portrait mode for the price I paid. I can fake it with Adobe Lightroom. So if you go to the little square, it's kind of like a dashed square. It's beside the white balance setting. Okay, that is going to change your aperture. Again, this is all digital. It's not actually moving your lens and opening up your lens, but it will open up this little scale. And the flower means that that's like macro. So it means it's going to have stuff in your foreground or close to you, really crisp, and the background is going to be very blurry. So think of like those pictures where people take of insects on flowers. I think that's why it's a flower, where the insect's super focused and then the back half of the flower is actually blurry. Okay, so you're going to want to scale towards the flower, so it'll be a smaller percentage if you want your foreground to be really crisp and your background to be blurry. If you want the opposite, and you go landscape mode, you push the slider towards the mountains, and you will see, I did two examples, exact same picture, and you can see now my foreground is blurry and my background is very crisp. Okay, so that's a really great way to fake portrait mode using Adobe Illustrator. And then, of course, you've got your filters. So let's say you have a picture and you've already taken it. You want to use your filters. So you would click, you go back to your main screen. You'll also do this with your camera, like your camera roll ones. If you took a picture last week and you want to edit it in here, you can. You just click on the other icon, not the camera, the other one, and then you'll choose your photo. Your camera roll will come up. You choose the photo you want. I chose this photo just because I'm having a great hair day in this picture. And you go to profiles. And that's where you will find your all sorts of filters that are available there. So I wanted to point that out to you. Then, I'll show you in the next thing actually how you would save it back to your camera roll then, okay? But that's where you'll find your profiles. Just remember when you're doing your filters, don't go crazy with it. Just stay kind of easy. Often you'll go nuts and then you'll like realize you went way too far. So just ease up a little bit and always err on the side of, I'm not sure that was enough. That is always the better way to go. You want it to still look like a real scene, right? Okay, so here's an example that I have of my son. So this is my older son, he's 11 and never takes pictures. The other day we were just being silly and I got my camera in his face. I was like, let me take your picture, and he did, which doesn't happen a lot. You might be able to see on your screen, you know what, because it was just like a take the picture quick, but he's got this cute smile on his face, oh my gosh. I really want to keep it, but it's blurry because it was in a rush. I didn't try anything very hard. It's just with my phone, right? I just did it. So, and I was looking at it, you know, I'm like, I also cut off the top of his head. I mean, things you might not notice, but as a photographer you maybe would. So I'm like, how can I kind of fix this a little bit? So I just wanted to go through a couple things you can do if you don't go in the filters and you're just editing. So you would click on the photo and you go to the edit, okay? So for me, I sharpened it. Normally sharpened very last, but in this case, I sharpened earlier. So I sharpened it, and that just makes things a little crisper because he was very, very blurry. And then the other thing I did is I was like, you know what, I kind of want this to be moody, side lit. So I upped the clarity, dehaze. Notice I didn't do a lot. Never, ever do anything a lot. You'll go back 4 days later if you do it a lot and you'll be like, ooh, what was I thinking? Because in your moment, in the moment, you're like, your brain's like, oh yeah, this is fun. Always go easy, okay? The other thing I did is the vignette is also in there, and that's, if you're wondering where these are, you can see the little icon that's highlighted here. It's the square with this kind of circle within it. Vignette, again, people, kind of cliche to go hardcore vignette. I did a little vignette just because I cut off his head and I wanted his head to kind of blend into the background a little bit more. Vignette is when it goes black around the edges. So I did that, and I also had a lot of really light components around the edges. So I just kind of wanted to put a little less focus on them. So I did that. And then the last thing here is you, just like for anything for sharing, you go up to that little kind of dots on almost an arrow shape, right? The same way you do with any app, it's the same symbol. And then what you're going to do is save to device. So if you edit something and then you go into your camera roll, you're like, you want to share it to Instagram, you're like, where is it? It's because you didn't save it to device, okay? So you had to click this save to device and then it'll go into your camera roll, your regular camera roll, and you'll have it. Otherwise, it's just stored in the app. So you'll be like wondering, where is it? So save to device is where you want it to be. Of course, if you want to email to someone, you can share to or whatever. You can also export, all that sort of thing, but at least that gives you an idea. Okay, so it's 2 o'clock right on the dot. Does anyone have any questions before we finish up? No questions, eh? Oh, okay. That's great. So what's the best lighting for nature shots? Okay, so you're in nature, so that's great. That's the first thing. The one thing you want to watch with nature is dappled light. So if you're going just nature, you're fine. But if you have people in nature, often the leaves, I mean, maybe not right now, but very soon the leaves will put harsh shadows if it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you want to be looking at the person's face to make sure they're all in shadow and not kind of all over the place. Okay, I am just, I have no idea how to get it to share, guys. This is what's happening right now. So you guys are just gonna have to look at my screen and go with that. Oh, pause share, there it is there. Okay, are you guys looking at me now? Give me a thumbs up if you're looking at me and not at my, okay, perfect. Okay, so other questions? Can you do a lot of this editing in Instagram as well? Yes, you can. And a fancy tip, you may not really realize this, but in Instagram, your filters, you can actually, I don't have it in front of me right now, but you can actually get rid of, you know how there's like 25 filters and it's overwhelming? You can actually edit your profile so that you only see the 3 filters that you like to use all the time. If you go in there, you also, there's old filters that are no longer shown that they've retired, but are still hiding within the app, and you can actually bring those forward. So if there's a filter that you loved 5 years ago, you can actually use those. Tips for photographing framed art with glass. Oh, okay, that's a really good one. So you got to look at your angles is 1, and 2, try and make it really diffuse light. Okay, so if you have any harsh light or one clear natural light source, that's what's coming through, right? So if you, I guess you're doing this on your phone, because I was going to say, if you kind of put a sheet over that, a really fine sheet over that, that's going to get rid of it. And then you could up your ISO if you had a DSLR. But if you're doing it with your phone, you just move your feet, and you're going to have to explore that a little bit. But trying to make your light even more diffuse is going to help. What about objects that are reflective? So that's right. So again, it's moving. You're going to have to move and shift. You can shift your subject, or you can shift yourself. Either way is going to do it. Tips for taking photos in tree climbers and trees. That's a very specific question. So you can't get up there with them. I think the better story you might want to tell, there's a couple things you can do. You might want to do like a landscape photo and be like, where's the tree climber? Another thing you can do is thinking about taking detail shots. So instead of worrying about getting them in the shot, think about maybe they're only not 2 feet, but maybe they're 5 feet above the ground, and you're taking pictures of their rugged boots, or you're taking pictures of the harness, or you're telling the story in different ways. And that can really help. You don't have to be up super high, right? To get those detail shots. Okay, I think I've got them all. Do people in nature need to be in the 2/3 grid? It looks really good. Think about those pictures. So someone asked, do people in nature need to be in the 2/3 grid? Okay, so it actually is quite pleasing to the eye. If you think about those great pictures that you have of, I don't know, someone's at Eagle's Nest or at some cliff somewhere, they're usually not head on. Usually the best pictures are they're looking out over the valley, and they are in the 1/3, or 2/3 grid, right? It is actually very appealing to still do that. You can also use your trees, kind of, so if you've got one huge tree, put it in the 2/3, and then put the person in the center underneath the tree. And so they kind of read together, and that also is going to help those branches of that tree. The person's eye is going to go up the trunk, around the branch, and then back down to the person in the middle. And you're tricking the eye into staying on your photo longer. Okay. 6 new messages. Oh, you guys are great. I'm really sorry we're going over here, as long as you don't mind me chatting. Feel free to leave if you need to. How do you organize your photos and versions? Okay, that's a great question, Susie. I think that's probably something we would actually have to save. I could go on and on about productivity and how I set up my files. One quick tip, I'll just say this one thing. Priority files, or files that I'm working on right now, I always start the folder with a 0 point and whatever it is, because numbers always come first. So if I have priorities, I always label the files with a number in front, so 0 point or 1 point, and then whatever it is. So that it's always going to be at the top of the mother folder, we'll say. Okay. I can go. Okay. All right, so I think that covers everything. So remember, you can email us at info@catscovecommunications.com if you have any questions at all. I'm available for you to go over anything. If you follow us on Instagram, it's at catscovecom. On Facebook, it's at catscove. And we are always giving out tips like this. So keep an eye on that, and look for in your inbox a cheat sheet and a link to most of this. I didn't record the first 5 minutes, sorry about that, but a link to most of the webinar and a cheat sheet probably in the next week or so. It takes us a little bit to get the file downloaded and back uploaded. Okay, and if you haven't, if you could send us a quick little message to Toby, or send us an email if you're from Kawartha Lakes, so that we can just report back to them saying, you know, that we had this many people in attendance from your region. That would be fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.